Belgium, January 14, 1945. A snow-covered field south of a town called Malmedy. Two American soldiers from a Graves registration company are kneeling in snow 4 feet deep. They have just uncovered the frozen body of a young man in olive drab. His arms are still raised above his head, exactly as they were when he died 4 weeks ago. One of the soldiers reaches for the chain around the boy's neck to read the name. There is no chain. There are no dog tags. Where the metal should be, there is only a raw red line on the skin, where something was ripped away. He looks at the next body. No dog tags. The next, no dog tags. The next, no dog tags. By the end of 2 days, 84 American boys will come up out of that field. 50 of them, maybe more, will have no name around their necks. Somebody took them. Somebody carried them west across Belgium, like a hunter carrying skins. This is the story of who that somebody was. And of the American lieutenant who lived through that field, walked into a courtroom in the ruins of Dachau 18 months later, and pointed his finger at the face he could never forget. Before we continue, subscribe. We tell the stories where the truth is heavier than legend. Every name of the 84 is known. And this is the story of how those names came to be lying in that field in the first place. To understand what happened, we have to go back 1 month, back to before the snow fell, back to the beginning. Aachen, Germany, mid-December 1944, the first American city on German soil taken by American infantry in October, held ever since. On the eastern edge of Belgium, just across the border, the ground is quiet. Too quiet, some officers will later say. But nobody is looking for a fight in the Ardennes. The Ardennes is the resting sector, the place where green units go to get their first taste of the front without expecting to bleed. Battery B, 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, is exactly that kind of unit. They are not gunners, they do not fire cannons. Their job is to listen, to watch, to use a technique called sound and flash ranging, a triangulation method where 3 observation posts detect the boom and muzzle flash of enemy artillery and calculate its position. They are the eyes and ears of the American guns. When they are working well, they are invisible. They are also lightly armed. Rifles, carbines, a few submachine guns, no tanks, no anti-tank weapons of any kind. If a German panzer column ever comes down the road, Battery B has nothing that can stop it. Nobody expects a German panzer column to come down the road. Among the men of Battery B is a young private first class named Frederick Clark. He is 22 years old, he stands just under 5.5 feet tall, he weighs 138 pounds. He came from a small town, trained at Camp Gruber in Oklahoma, shipped out through Omaha Beach in August, and has been working the observation stations of the American First Army ever since. He is one of the ones who will not come home. There are others. There is Sergeant Kenneth Ahrens. There is Private Ted Paluch. There is Corporal Harold Billow, a 19-year-old from Pennsylvania, who will one day fly 84 flags in his front yard every December 17th until he is an old man. There is Sergeant Henry Roy Zack from Wisconsin. There is Lieutenant Virgil Lary, the one man in the whole battery who wears an officer's bars, a 27-year-old Kentuckian who joined the artillery because he was good at math. They are not heroes, not yet, not in the storybook sense. They are ordinary boys in ordinary olive drab, a convoy of trucks, jeeps and cargo trailers. About 115 men in total. On the morning of December 17th they receive orders. They are to leave Aachen. They are to drive south. They are to link up with the 7th Armored Division near a Belgian town called Sankt Vith. It should be a routine trip. A few hours down secondary roads. Some snow. Nothing to worry about. None of them know that Adolf Hitler has just launched the largest German offensive in the West since 1940. Now the camera moves east. 600 kilometers away, in the forests near the Belgian border, a very different kind of army is waking up. 3 German armies, 250,000 men, 600 armored vehicles. This is Operation Watch on the Rhine, Hitler's final gamble. A lightning strike through the Ardennes, aimed at splitting the Americans from the British, capturing the port of Antwerp, and forcing the Western Allies to sue for peace. At the sharp tip of this spear rides a single armored task force, Kampfgruppe Peiper, the point of the point. And at the head of Kampfgruppe Peiper rides its commander, Joachim Peiper. He goes by Jochen. He is 29 years old, dark-haired, striking, a man other officers describe with words like brilliant and ruthless and cold. He wears the black collar tabs of the Waffen-SS. His unit is the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, part of the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. The Bodyguard Division, Hitler's personal division, the oldest and most fanatical armored formation in the Nazi war machine. Peiper is not an accident of the war. He was chosen for this. Between 1940 and 1941, before he ever led a battalion in combat, Peiper served as first adjutant to Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler. He carried Himmler's briefcase. He took Himmler's dictation. He stood at Himmler's shoulder during inspections of concentration camps in Poland. He knew, better than almost any field officer in the German army, what the SS was and what it was capable of. He did not stumble into war crimes. He was educated in them. By 1943, he was a battalion commander on the Eastern Front, where his tactics earned him a nickname among German troops themselves. Blowtorch. It was said that villages his unit passed through tended not to survive. In February 1943, at the Ukrainian villages of Yefremovka and Semyonovka, his men killed hundreds of civilians and burned them inside a church. In September of that same year, in the Italian town of Boves, his soldiers massacred civilians and burned homes as a punitive action. None of this was hidden from his superiors. They rewarded him. They gave him the Knight's Cross. They gave him a division to command. And on the night of December 15, 1944, they gave him this mission. Break through the American lines. Drive west. Do not stop for prisoners. Do not stop for civilians. Do not stop for anything. Reach the Meuse River in 3 days. Around a campfire the night before the attack, Peiper's officers pass word down to their tank crews. The exact wording will be argued about for the rest of the century. But the substance is not in doubt. The men of Kampfgruppe Peiper understand, before a single shot is fired, that this operation will be conducted with what one German officer will later call a wave of terror. At 4:30 in the morning of December 17th, they roll. By dawn, they have overrun the first American position at Honsfeld. Sleeping GIs stumble out of houses in their underwear. Some are shot. Some are captured. Some are shot after they are captured. In Bullingen, a few hours later, more American prisoners are killed. The pattern is not accidental. The pattern is the plan. And now, around noon, Peiper's column reaches a small crossroads on a country road south of Malmedy. 5 roads meet at this spot. Belgians call it Baunes. Americans, looking at their maps, call it 5 Points. At the very same moment, from the north, an American convoy is approaching the same crossroads. Trucks and jeeps painted olive drab. A small column of green troops from an observation battalion driving south to Sankt Vith. About 115 men. Battery B has just met the point of the spear. The lead German tank sees them first. It opens fire without warning. The lead American truck erupts in flame. The convoy jerks to a halt. Men leap from the trucks and dive into the ditches on either side of the road. Some run into a small cafe at the crossroads, the Café Bodawe, owned by a Belgian widow. Some try to flee back the way they came. There is a brief exchange of small arms fire, carbines against machine guns, rifles against tanks. It lasts perhaps 5 minutes. And then the Americans do what any lightly armed observation unit does when it meets a Waffen-SS armored column head-on. They surrender. They come out of the ditches with their hands on their helmets. Some of them are laughing nervously, the way frightened young men sometimes laugh. A Belgian farmer named Henri Lejoly, watching from a nearby house, will later say the Americans seemed strangely calm, almost casual, in the first moments after they gave up. They believe they are going to be prisoners of war. They believe there are rules. The SS soldiers wave them out of the ditches with pistols and submachine guns. They march them, hands raised, to a small snow-covered field beside the road. About 120 men standing in a rough cluster, breath fogging in the December air. Above them the sky is heavy and grey. The temperature is below freezing. 2 SS half-tracks pull up on the road, angled so that their pintle-mounted machine guns face the field. Lieutenant Lary is somewhere in the middle of the group. Beside him is Homer Ford, a young military policeman who had been directing traffic at the crossroads only 10 minutes earlier. Around them are boys they have trained with, driven with, eaten with. Arends, Paluk, Billow, Zach. Frederick Clark, small and thin, standing quietly. The German tanks rumble past on the road, heading west. They do not stop. The mission is speed. This detour is somebody else's problem now. The Americans stand in the field. Nobody speaks. Somewhere a wounded man moans. Somewhere a truck engine is still ticking as it cools. A young SS private stands at the edge of the road holding a pistol. His name is Georg Fleps. He is 23 years old, born in Romania to an ethnic German family, one of the tens of thousands of Volksdeutsche recruited into the Waffen-SS in the last brutal years of the war. He is not a decision maker. He is not an officer. He is a man with a pistol standing on a road in Belgium in December of 1944. He raises the pistol. He takes aim at the crowd of Americans standing 30 yards away, hands still on their heads. He fires twice, and in the field, one of the boys standing in the front row of the crowd folds silently onto the snow. For a heartbeat, nobody moves. Nobody speaks. The world holds still. Then the machine guns on the half-tracks open up. And this is where we have to stop, because what happens next in that field takes only 15 minutes, and it will define the rest of the Battle of the Bulge, the rest of Peiper's life, the rest of Lary's life, and the rest of a story that stretches all the way from a Belgian farmer's field in 1944 to a burning house in southern France 32 years later. We have to understand who was standing in that field. We have to understand what they carried in their pockets, around their necks, in their wallets. Because before Dachau there is the field, and before the field there is one more minute of silence. The Americans stand with their hands on their helmets. The SS half-tracks idle. Georg Fleps holds a pistol that has just fired twice. The boy on the ground is not moving. And Lieutenant Virgil Lary, 27 years old, from Kentucky, watches Fleps' face and understands in a single frozen instant exactly what is about to happen. The two pistol shots hang in the winter air. The boy on the ground does not get up. His helmet has rolled a few inches away from his head. A dark spot spreads slowly under him into the snow. Around him 120 American soldiers stand with their hands on their helmets and do not move. They have been trained for this. If you are captured, you comply. You keep your hands where they can be seen. You do not run. You do not speak unless spoken to. You wait for someone to write your name on a list, because a list means your mother will eventually get a letter that says prisoner of war instead of missing in action. Every man in that field is thinking about the list. Lieutenant Virgil Lary is thinking about something else. He is watching the face of Georg Fleps as Fleps lowers the pistol. He is watching the two SS half-tracks parked on the road, their machine guns pointing directly at the crowd. He is watching an SS non-commissioned officer standing beside one of the half-tracks, hand raised in the air. And Lary understands, in a way he will never be able to put into words for the rest of his life, that no one is writing his name down. The hand drops, the machine guns open up. The sound is not a rattle. The sound is a single tearing roar that comes from two directions at once. The bullets sweep the front rows of the crowd first. Men fold, men fly backwards, men fall on top of other men. There is no place to run because the field is surrounded on three sides by soldiers and on the fourth side by more soldiers. The nearest cover is the burning cafe at the crossroads 60 yards away. Lary drops. He drops before he is hit. He drops the way an animal drops when a predator moves. He goes flat into the snow and he stays flat and he does not breathe. Above him the machine guns keep firing. He can hear the bullets passing over him. He can hear them hitting the men beside him. He can hear boys he trained with making sounds he has never heard a human being make before. Homer Ford is somewhere nearby doing the same thing. Kenneth Ahrens, Ted Palach, Harold Billow, 19 years old, still just a boy. They are all doing the same thing. They are all playing dead while dying men fall on top of them. The machine guns fire for perhaps a full minute. It feels like an hour. Then they stop, and what happens next is worse. The SS men come down off the half-tracks. They come into the field. They walk between the bodies. They are laughing. This is documented. Multiple survivors will testify to it at Dachau. The SS men are laughing the way men laugh when a hard job is nearly finished. They carry pistols. When they find a body that is still breathing, they lean down and they fire once into the head at close range. Sometimes they do not lean down. Sometimes they simply put the muzzle against the base of the skull and pull the trigger. The Belgians in nearby houses hear these single shots for the next 20 minutes. 1. Silence. 1. Silence 1. The autopsies, when they come, will find 41 of the 84 dead with pistol wounds to the head, 10 with skulls shattered by rifle butts, 9 still frozen in the posture of surrender, hands above their heads, Lary lies in the snow and listens to the executions moving closer to him. He does not pray. He will say later he did not have the presence of mind to pray. He simply holds his breath in short shallow pulls and tries to make his body as small as possible under the weight of the dead man lying across his back. He can feel that man's blood soaking through his own uniform. He can feel it warm at first and then cold. An SS soldier stops beside him. Lary hears the crunch of boots in snow inches from his face. He hears the man breathing. He hears the click of a pistol being cocked. He does not know what saves him. Maybe the SS soldier decides the boy on top of Lary took the bullet through both of them. Maybe he simply moves on. The boots crunch away. The pistol shot comes somewhere else. Lary is still alive. But the SS men are not finished. Now they begin to walk among the bodies with a different purpose. They kneel beside the dead. They take watches off wrists. They take rings off fingers. They open wallets and pull out photographs. They lift the chains around the necks of dead American boys and they pull the dog tags free. Sometimes the chains break easily. Sometimes they have to yank. The number that will eventually be missing when the graves registration teams come to count in January is somewhere around 50. 50 small stamped metal ovals stripped from the throats of dead men. 50 names that should have gone home in the pocket of a chaplain's coat, gone instead into the pockets of Waffen-SS soldiers who will carry them west for another 3 days before dropping them, losing them, throwing them away. Some of those tags will never be found. Some of the men wearing them will be listed missing in action for months. Their mothers will keep the porch light on. Their wives will keep their letters in a drawer beside the bed. They do not yet know that their boys are already lying in a field in Belgium under a snow that has not started to fall yet, but will fall within 24 hours and will not melt until the middle of January. But that is later. Right now in the field the SS souvenir hunt is nearly over. The tanks of Kampfgruppe Peiper are already rolling west toward Ligneville and the next objective. Peiper himself is not in the field. He has already gone forward. He never sees the crossroads at Baugnes with his own eyes. His men have done this without him, because they have been trained to do it, because they were told to do it, and because on the Eastern Front they did it every week, and no one ever punished them. Something moves in the pile of bodies. One of the Americans breaks. He has been lying still, watching his friends die, and something in him snaps. He jumps up and runs for the woods. 2 or 3 others take the same chance, then 5, then 10. The SS machine gunners see them and open up again. The runners fold in the snow, but a few of them make it to the tree line. And once inside the woods, they keep running. Lary is one of them. He waits until the shooting is aimed elsewhere, and then he moves. He crawls first, then he rises to a crouch, then he runs. He runs through the woods with a bullet crease on his skin and blood not his own soaked into the front of his coat. He runs toward the sound of American voices because he can hear artillery in the distance, and where there is American artillery, there is safety. He limps into Malmedy in the late afternoon. He is not alone. Homer Ford makes it. Kenneth Ahrens makes it. Ted Paluch makes it. Harold Billow makes it. Roughly 43 men, out of the 120 who stood in the field, will eventually reach American lines. Some of them will die of their wounds in the following days. Some will carry the wounds for the rest of their lives. By nightfall on December 17th, they are telling their story to anyone who will listen. And that is when the story stops being about one field in Belgium and starts being about the rest of the war. Now the camera lifts. It rises above the crossroads at Baugnes, above the woods where wounded men are still crawling, above the burning Café Baudarway, above the German column that has already rolled 10 kilometers further west. It rises high enough to see the whole of northern Belgium in the December dusk, and it moves west, to a headquarters in the town of Malmedy, where the first survivors are arriving and being handed cups of coffee that they cannot hold because their hands are shaking too hard. To a communications tent where a young officer is typing out an urgent teletype, to the message that will be on the desk of every American corps commander in Northern Europe before midnight. Massacre near Malmedy. Repeat, massacre near Malmedy. Approximately 80 American prisoners of war shot in a field by Waffen-SS troops of the 1st SS Panzer Division. Survivors reaching American lines. By dawn on December 18th, the news is in the hands of General Omar Bradley at 12th Army Group. By breakfast, it is in the hands of General Dwight Eisenhower at Supreme Headquarters. By noon, it is in the newspapers. Associated Press correspondent Hal Boyle files his story from Belgium that same day. It runs on the front page of the evening editions of December 18th in every major American city. Chicago, New York, Boston, Los Angeles, mothers in Ohio read it over breakfast, and somewhere in France at the headquarters of the U.S. Third Army in Nancy, a 59-year-old general reads it too. His name is George S. Patton. Patton has been fighting Germans since before America even entered the war. He knows what regular Wehrmacht units are capable of, and he knows what SS units are capable of, and he has, until this moment, kept a kind of grudging respect for the professional German soldier. He does not respect what he reads on December 18th. He writes about it in his diary that night in short, hard sentences. He writes that the SS have shown their true face. He writes that this is not war, this is murder. 2 days later, on the morning of December 19, 1944, Patton is called to an emergency meeting at Verdun. He drives through fog and freezing rain to get there. In the room when he arrives are Eisenhower, Bradley, Air Chief Marshal Tedder, and every senior American commander on the Western Front. The mood is grim. The Germans have broken through the Ardennes. The 101st Airborne is surrounded in Bastogne. Nobody knows how deep the penetration will go. Eisenhower asks the room what can be done. Patton says he can attack north with 3 divisions in 48 hours. The room does not believe him. His own staff barely believes him. Turning an entire army 90 degrees on its axis, in winter, on iced roads, and having them attack 100 kilometers to the north within 2 days is not a thing armies do. It is not a thing armies can do. But Patton has already given the order. Before he left for Verdun, he told his staff that if the answer was yes, he wanted the Third Army moving before he got home. On December 20th, 133,000 men and 6,000 vehicles begin the largest wheeling movement of American forces in the Second World War. They drive north through Arlon, through blizzards, through blackout, through fuel shortages, on roads sheeted with ice, in the coldest European winter in a generation. Tanks roll for 40 and 50 hours without stopping. Drivers fall asleep at the wheel, and their trucks slide off the road. Infantry ride on the outside of tanks with blankets over their heads because there is no room inside. On December 22nd, the 4th Armored Division makes its first contact with German forces south of Bastogne. On December 23rd, it fights through the town of Martelange. On December 26th, just after 4 in the afternoon, the lead tanks of the 4th Armored break through into Bastogne itself. The 101st Airborne is relieved. The siege is over. It is one of the most stunning feats of American arms in the entire war. And underneath it, driving it, sharpening it, is the memory of the field at Baugnes. Because the men of the Third Army know what happened at Malmedy. The story has reached them. It has been repeated in mess tents and around campfires. It has been passed from one platoon to the next. In some cases it has been passed around with details added and details lost, but the core of the story never changes. The SS lined our boys up in a field and shot them. The men of the Third Army are angry. And now we come to the hardest part of this story, the part that is not in most tellings, the part that Patton himself hoped would never be told. On December 21st, 4 days after the massacre, the headquarters of the 328th Infantry Regiment, part of the 26th Infantry Division, issues a written order. It reads in part, "No SS troops or paratroopers will be taken prisoner, but will be shot on sight." That order is a war crime. Under the Geneva Conventions, a soldier who has laid down his arms and offered his surrender is protected. Killing him is murder, no matter what his uniform says. No matter what his unit did the week before. The order issued by the 328th Infantry is illegal on its face. It is passed down the chain, and it is obeyed by men who have just heard about Malmedy, and who have decided in their grief and their fury that the rules no longer apply. It is not the only such order. Similar unwritten understandings ripple through American units across the Ardennes in the last 2 weeks of December. Nobody keeps records, nobody files reports. The pattern is the pattern of small unit revenge, 3 or 4 SS prisoners at a time taken behind a barn and shot. It happens. It is documented at Dachau. It is documented in the diaries of American officers who wrote about it privately and never spoke of it publicly. And on New Year's Day 1945 it becomes something worse. The village of Chenogne in the Belgian Ardennes sits about 10 kilometers west of Bastogne. On January 1st, elements of the US 11th Armored Division, a Green Division new to combat, fights through the village in bitter house-to-house combat. When it is over, the Americans have taken about 80 German prisoners. The Americans march the prisoners into a field. They set up machine guns, they shoot them. The number is not known for certain. Estimates range from 21 to 80. The most detailed eyewitness account, from a staff sergeant named John Fagg of the 21st Armored Infantry Battalion, describes about 60 German prisoners machine gunned in a field near Chenogne on the morning of January 1st, 1945. It is a mirror. It is Malmedy played back with the uniforms reversed. The news reaches 3rd Army headquarters within days. General Patton, the same man who wrote in his diary on December 18th that the SS massacre at Malmedy was murder, now writes about Chenogne in his diary on January 4th, 1945. The exact words are these: "The 11th Armoured is very green and took unnecessary losses to no effect. There were also some unfortunate incidents in the shooting of prisoners." I hope we can conceal this. That last sentence is the one that will be argued about for 80 years. I hope we can conceal this. The most decorated American general on the Western Front, the man who drove his army through hell to relieve Bastogne, who avenged Malmedy at every crossroads from Arlon to St. Fifth, writes in his own private diary that when American soldiers murdered German prisoners, he wanted the story buried, and it was buried. There is no investigation, there are no court-martials. The names of the men who fired the machine guns at Chenogne are known to their comrades and to their families and to a handful of historians who came looking half a century later. But there is no trial, there is no accountability, there are no dog tags collected as evidence. The German dead at Chenogne go into unmarked graves, and the American army moves on to the Rhine. Patton's diary sits in a box for decades. The story of Chenogne surfaces in bits and pieces. A veteran here. A declassified file there. In 2018, an American investigative journalist named Chris Harland Dunaway will publish a full account, drawing on Patton's own handwritten pages, and the story will finally reach the public 73 years after it happened. But this is the truth of the Battle of the Bulge that does not appear on the memorials. The massacre at Malmedy was not the only massacre. The war crime at Belgium was not the only war crime. In the fury that followed December 17, 1944, American soldiers did to German prisoners what Waffen-SS soldiers did to American prisoners. Fewer times, in smaller numbers. But they did it, and their commanding general knew they did it, and he wanted it hidden. None of this makes what happened at Belgium any smaller. None of this makes the 84 dead of Battery B any less murdered. None of this makes Georg Fleps, standing on that road with a pistol, any less guilty of firing the first 2 shots into a field of unarmed men. But it does mean that the story of Malmedy cannot be told cleanly. There is no clean side. There is no story where good men fought bad men and justice was done at the end. There is only a field in Belgium, and another field in Belgium, and a diary in a drawer, and 84 names, and a lieutenant who came home and could not stop thinking about the face of the man who fired the first shot. That lieutenant is Virgil Lary. He has been recovering in a hospital in Belgium since the last week of December 1944. He has a wound in his foot from the machine gun burst that killed the man standing next to him. He cannot walk without pain. He will be sent home. He will spend the rest of the war stateside, medically retired, listed permanently disabled. But he will not forget. He carries something the SS could not take from him at Baugnes. He carries a name. He carries a face. The face of a thin young Romanian German private with dark eyes who raised a pistol and fired twice on a snowy afternoon. Somewhere in Germany, Georg Fleps is riding in an SS half-track west toward the Meuse. He does not know that his face has already been photographed onto the memory of a man who will testify against him in a courtroom 18 months from now. And somewhere further east, in a field headquarters in Belgium, a very tired lieutenant colonel named Joachim Peiper is looking at a map and beginning to realize that his beautiful assault has failed. His fuel is running out, his tanks are being ambushed. The American Third Army is coming up from the south. The 101st Airborne has held Bastogne. By the end of January, his Kampfgruppe will be shattered. Peiper himself will abandon his last surviving vehicles on the night of December 23, 1944, at the town of L'Église and walk out of the Ardennes on foot, leading roughly 800 exhausted survivors through the woods toward German lines. He will make it back to Germany. He will not know it yet, but he has less than 5 months left as a free man. The trial is coming. The trial where 74 Waffen-SS soldiers will stand accused of the murder of American prisoners. The trial that will end with 43 death sentences and not a single hanging. The trial where the story of Malmedy will collide with the story of Chenogne, and neither one will emerge whole. The war ends on May 8, 1945. In a field in southern Bavaria near the town of Marktoberdorf, a tired man in a Stasi uniform sits on the running board of an American jeep and waits to be processed. He has walked out of the collapsing Reich with a small group of surviving officers. He carries no weapons. He does not resist. When the American MP asks his name, he gives it without hesitation. Joachim Peiper. The MP writes it down. He does not know the name yet. In the chaos of German surrender, thousands of SS officers are being logged and shipped to camps every day. But someone further up the chain does know the name. Within 72 hours, Peiper is separated from the general prisoner population and sent under guard to an interrogation center at Zuffenhausen, near Stuttgart. He is 30 years old. He has spent 1/3 of his life inside the SS. And he is about to spend most of the rest of it trying to explain what happened at a Belgian crossroads on the 17th of December. The Americans already have witnesses. They already have survivors. Virgil Lary, back in the United States now, medically retired, has been giving statements to Army investigators since January. Homer Ford has given statements. Kenneth Ahrens has given statements. 21 survivors gave statements on December 17th and 18th of 1944, on the very day of the massacre and the day after, long before any of them could have coordinated stories or been coached by prosecutors. They all told the same story, word for word, detail for detail of field machine guns, SS men laughing, single pistol shots to the head. Watches and rings and dog tags stripped from the dead. The army investigators have something else too. They have German prisoners. Not Peiper, others, enlisted men and junior officers of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, captured in the months after Baugny's. Some of them, when questioned, confirm the massacre. Some of them name names. Some of them describe the order to take no prisoners as it was passed down inside Kampfgruppe Peiper on the night of December 15, 1944. By the end of 1945, the case file is thousands of pages long. The Americans decide to hold the trial at Dachau. The choice is deliberate. Dachau, the first concentration camp the Nazis ever built, opened in 1933, liberated by the Americans on April 29, 1945. A place where over 40,000 people died. The wire is still up, the barracks are still standing. The Americans convert one of the administrative buildings into a courtroom. When the SS defendants are marched inside for the first time, they walk past the same watchtowers under which prisoners were beaten to death 6 months earlier. The message is not subtle. The trial opens on May 16, 1946. 74 defendants sit in the dock. They include Peiper. They include his division commander, Sepp Dietrich, the man who ran the 6th SS Panzer Army during the Ardennes Offensive, Hitler's personal driver in the 1920s, one of the founding thugs of the Nazi movement. They include the young private Georg Fleps, 24 years old now, still thin, still narrow-faced, sitting in a numbered placard that reads simply 42. The chief prosecutor is Lieutenant Colonel Burton F. Ellis, a 42-year-old attorney from California who has spent the last 6 months reading autopsy reports and looking at photographs of frozen boys in a Belgian field. The chief defense counsel is Colonel Willis M. Everett Jr., a 46-year-old lawyer from Atlanta, Georgia, who did not ask for this assignment. He was ordered into it. Everett is not a Nazi sympathizer. He is not soft on war crimes. He is a corporate lawyer in uniform, and he has been told that his job is to defend 74 Waffen-SS men from a case that the prosecution is calling airtight. Everett takes the job seriously. It will define the rest of his life. The trial runs for 2 months. It hears from Belgian civilians who watched from windows. It hears from American medics who examine the frozen bodies. It hears from German soldiers who testify against their own comrades in exchange for immunity. Nearly 100 sworn written statements from the accused themselves are entered into evidence. statements taken during American interrogations in 1945 and early 1946. And on May 20th, 1946, Virgil Lary takes the stand. He is 28 years old. He walks with a limp from the wound in his foot. He is now a former officer, retired for disability. He wears a civilian suit, not a uniform. He sits down in the witness box, and Lieutenant Colonel Ellis begins to walk him through the events of December 17th, 1944. Lary describes the convoy, he describes the ambush, he describes the surrender, he describes standing in the field with his hands on his helmet. He describes the two SS half-tracks angled toward the crowd. He describes a young SS private walking to the edge of the road with a pistol in his hand. Ellis asks him if he sees that young private in the courtroom. Lary stands up. He walks across the courtroom floor. He walks past Sepp Dietrich, the general. He walks past Joachim Peiper, the colonel. He does not look at either of them. He stops in front of defendant number 42. Georg Fleps stares back at him without expression. Lary raises his hand and points. "That is the man," he says. "That is the man who fired the first shots." The courtroom is silent for a long moment. It is the moment the entire story has been moving toward. It is the axis around which everything else turns. A 28-year-old former lieutenant from Kentucky, pointing across a room in the ruins of the Third Reich, at the face he could not forget. Fleps does not deny it. His own defense will later argue that he fired only warning shots, that he did not intend to start the massacre. The prosecution will point to the two dead boys who fell from those warning shots and to the machine guns that opened up on his signal. The trial ends on July 11th, 1946. The verdicts come down on July 16th. Of the 74 defendants, 43 are sentenced to death by hanging. 22 are sentenced to life in prison. 8 receive lesser sentences, only 1 is acquitted. Joachim Peiper is sentenced to death. Sepp Dietrich is sentenced to life. Georg Fleps is sentenced to death. The men are transferred to a war crimes prison at Landsberg, the same fortress where Hitler once wrote Mein Kampf 22 years earlier. They wait to be hanged. None of them will hang. This is where the story turns dark in a way that has nothing to do with December 17th, 1944. This is where the aftermath of Malmedy becomes its own kind of tragedy. Colonel Willis Everett, the defense attorney, returns to Atlanta after the trial and cannot let it go. He believes his clients were mistreated. He believes American interrogators used physical coercion, mock trials, threats against family members, hoods over heads, sleep deprivation, to extract the confessions that formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. 6 of the defendants complained of mistreatment during the trial itself. After the trial, more complaints emerge. Everett writes letters. He writes to the Secretary of the Army. He writes to congressmen. He writes to newspapers. In 1948, he files a petition with the United States Supreme Court, arguing that the Malmedy verdicts should be overturned because the confessions were coerced. The Supreme Court declines to hear the case by a 4-4 tie, but the story is now in the American press. And it catches the attention of a first-term Republican senator from Wisconsin named Joseph McCarthy. This is 1949. McCarthy has not yet become the man he will become. He has not yet given the speech at Wheeling. He has not yet launched the Red Scare. He is a junior senator looking for an issue, and the Malmedy case is his issue. In the spring of 1949, McCarthy inserts himself into the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee investigation of the Malmedy trial. He accuses American Army investigators of using torture. He accuses the prosecution of manufacturing evidence. He storms out of a hearing on May 20th, 1949, accusing the subcommittee chairman of a whitewash. The investigation goes nowhere in a legal sense. The convictions stand, but the political damage is done. The reputation of the Dachau trials is permanently stained in the American public mind. And the sentences begin to be commuted. Between 1948 and 1951, one by one, the death sentences at Landsberg are reduced to life in prison. Then reduced again to fixed terms, then reduced again. The pressure is coming from West German public opinion, which is furious about ongoing American war crimes trials at the exact moment the United States is trying to build the new Federal Republic into an ally against the Soviet Union. Cold War geopolitics takes precedence over cold weather justice. The last death sentence is commuted on January 31st, 1951. Nobody hangs. Georg Fleps, condemned in 1946 for firing the first 2 shots at Baugnez, is released from Landsberg in 1952. He is 31 years old. According to available records, he returned to Romania. He then disappears from the historical record. Sepp Dietrich, sentenced to life in prison, is released on October 26, 1955, after 10 years behind bars. He returns to West Germany, becomes a hero to former Waffen-SS veterans associations, dies of a heart attack in 1966 at the age of 73. And Joachim Peiper walks out of Landsberg on December 22, 1956, at the age of 41. He has served 11 years for the deaths of 84 American prisoners at Baugnez, and for the additional 278 American prisoners and 111 Belgian civilians killed by his Kampfgruppe during the Ardennes offensive. 11 years, about 50 days per victim. Peiper tries to build a civilian life in Germany. He works for Porsche. He is fired when workers discover his identity. He works for Volkswagen. He is fired again. West Germany in the late 1950s is trying to bury its past, and Peiper is the past made flesh. He cannot escape the name. In 1972 he moves to France. This is the decision that ends him. He buys a small house in the village of Traves, in the Haute-Saône region in eastern France. He lives quietly under a partial alias. He writes memoirs. He gives occasional interviews to sympathetic German journalists. He tells them he has no regrets. He tells them the Waffen-SS were soldiers like any other soldiers. He tells them Malmedy was a battlefield accident that the victors magnified into a crime. He is wrong about all of it. He knows he is wrong about all of it. In June of 1976, a French communist newspaper, L'Humanité, publishes his name and his address. The paper explains correctly that the man living in the house on the edge of Traves is the SS colonel who commanded Kampfgruppe Peiper in December of 1944. Local French veterans of the resistance receive the news. Some of them lost family members to SS reprisals during the war. Some of them are the sons of men who lost family members. Peiper receives death threats. He sends his wife back to Germany. He stays alone in the house because he is stubborn, because he does not believe anyone will actually come. On the night of July 13, 1976, the eve of Bastille Day, someone comes. The house is set on fire with Molotov cocktails. When the local fire brigade arrives, the roof has collapsed. When the smoke clears, they find a body. It has been so completely burned that dental records are required for identification. Some fragments of a hunting rifle are found near the corpse, suggesting Peiper tried to defend himself before the flames took him. Joachim Peiper died on the night of the French national holiday in a burning house at the age of 61. No one was ever arrested. The French police investigated. They interviewed dozens of local men, many of whom had known family members killed by SS units during the war. Everyone had alibis. Everyone had witnesses. The investigation quietly closed. Justice of a kind. Not the kind you can put in a courtroom. By the summer of 1976, most of the other names in this story are already gone. Sepp Dietrich died in 1966. Werner Petschke, the SS major who allegedly gave the direct order in the field at Baugnez, died in Austria in late March of 1945 after being wounded by an accidental Panzerfaust discharge from one of his own men before he could ever be tried. Colonel Willis Everett, the American defense lawyer who spent a decade fighting for men he did not personally admire because he believed the American justice system had failed them, died of a heart attack in 1958. He was 56 years old. Lieutenant Colonel Burton Ellis, the chief prosecutor, died in 1968. General George S. Patton had been gone the longest. On December 9, 1945, less than 8 months after VE Day, Patton was riding in the back seat of a staff car near Mannheim, Germany. His car struck a 2.5-ton truck at low speed. The impact broke his neck. He was paralyzed from the chest down. He lived 12 more days in a hospital bed in Heidelberg. He died on December 21, 1945, at the age of 60. His diary went home in a footlocker. The pages describing the Malmedy Massacre were eventually published. The pages describing Chenogne were quietly held back for decades. When they finally emerged, they did not fit the story of the war that America wanted to remember. They still do not fit that story. That is why they are still not in most histories of the Battle of the Bulge, even the ones written for the 80th anniversary in 2024. The truth is often like that. It sits in a drawer for a long time. Then somebody opens the drawer. Virgil Lary lived the longest of the men who stood in the field. He returned to Kentucky after the trial. He got married, he built a life, he worked in insurance. He did not talk much about Balnez. When journalists came, he answered their questions. When historians came, he answered their questions. When the survivors held reunions, he attended. In 1949, during the McCarthy hearings, when the Malmedy trial was being publicly attacked, Lary wrote a letter directly to the Secretary of the Army. He was not obligated to write it. He was a retired officer. But he wrote it anyway. He wrote that he had personally observed the American war crimes investigators during the trial preparation. He wrote that the interrogations he witnessed were fair. He wrote that the men convicted at Dachau were guilty of what they were convicted of. He wrote that he had been in the field. He knew what he had seen. He was one of the few voices in America defending the trial when almost no one else would. He died in 1988. Kenneth Arons returned to civilian life in the United States after the war. Ted Pallock died in 2018. Harold Billow was the last known survivor of the Malmedy Massacre. He lived in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. Every December 17th he set out 84 American flags in his front yard, one for each man who did not come home from Balnez. He gave interviews into his 90s. He said he did not want to go back to Belgium because the memories were too heavy. He died in 2022 at the age of 96. There is no one left now who stood in that field. No American who saw it, no German who did it. The war has passed out of living memory and into the memory of stones. The stones are at Balnez. In July of 1950, a permanent memorial was built at the crossroads, across the road from the field itself. It is a low stone wall. Set into the wall are 84 flat stones. Each stone carries a name. Each name belonged to a boy. Sergeant Kenneth Anderson, Private First Class Frederick Clark, Corporal Robert Cohen, Private Alfred Kinsman, Private First Class David Murphy, Sergeant Thomas Anderson, and 78 others. If you go to Balnez today, you can walk along the wall and touch each stone. The field behind the wall is quiet. It is farmland now. Cows graze where the machine guns fired. Belgian children ride bicycles past on the road. In summer, the grass grows high enough to hide the memorial from drivers passing through. You can find the stone for Frederick Clark, 22 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, 138 pounds. You can put your hand on it, you can stand there for a while. Somewhere in an archive in Maryland, there is a box of dog tags recovered from the field between January and April of 1945. There are not 84 of them. Some of the boys were found with their tags still around their necks, but many were not. The missing tags never came home. They were carried west by Kampfgruppe Peiper on December 17th, dropped in ditches or French farmyards or the muddy roads to Stavelot, lost forever. 50 of them, or thereabouts, perhaps more. Nobody counted. They belonged to men whose names are still on the wall at Balnez. They belonged to men whose mothers, some of them, never fully accepted the death because there was no tag to bury. They belonged to the boys who stood in a snowy field on a Sunday afternoon in December, with their hands on their helmets, waiting for someone to write their names down. Someone eventually did. It just took a very long time. That is the story of what happened at Malmedy. It is also the story of what happened at Chenogne. It is the story of a general who did the right thing in December and the wrong thing in January and hoped nobody would ever find out. It is the story of a lieutenant who came home with a limp and a memory. It is the story of a young SS private who fired 2 shots and lived 30 more years before disappearing back into the country he came from. It is the story of 84 Americans in a field. It is the story of 80 German prisoners in another field 2 weeks later. It is the story of one war, and every war, and the way the men who fight it are never quite the same afterwards, no matter which side they were on, no matter which uniform they wore, no matter who was writing the history. The wall at Balnez does not judge. It just holds the names, 84 of them. Every December 17th, small groups of Belgians and Americans gather at the wall. There is a service, there are flags. Someone reads the names aloud. It takes several minutes. When each name is read, a bell rings. The bell has been ringing for 75 years. It will ring next December, and the December after that, and every December for as long as there is a stone wall in a Belgian field, and someone who still remembers to come. That is all that is left of what happened. That is all that ever needed to be left. The rest was carried home in wooden boxes 60 years ago and buried in cemeteries in Ohio and Kentucky and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts under headstones the size of a soldier's outstretched hand. If you are ever driving through the Ardennes in December and you see the sign for Baugnes, take the exit. Follow the small road. Park at the memorial. Walk along the wall. Read the names. That is the ending they earned. Not the trial. Not the sentences. Not the burning house in France. Not the diary in the drawer. Just the names. Just the wall. Just the quiet field behind it, waiting for the next snow.